All right, for our next order of business, I wanted to give you guys kind of a class orientation, give you an idea sort of how the class is arranged and what it's all made up of. So right off the bat, we have essentially four books that are going to be kind of critical here, maybe three, depending on how you look at it. You should have received these already through your school. If not, please reach out to me, reach out to the appropriate person within your school. So our first book is going to be the IEC Student Manual. Should look just like this. Basically, this is the bulk of our content. This is where the lessons and material actually come from. And all of these things have sort of an online counterpart, which I'll show you in the next video. But you guys all have this hard copy book here, the first year student manual. Along with that, you should have a student workbook. Looks identical, except for this one is called workbook rather than manual. This is a book that is essentially just filled with worksheets. Now, what I'll tell you, all those worksheets, once again, are on our online platform, the Learning Management System, or the LMS. That's actually where you're going to be completing these worksheets, is online. You don't need to complete them in your workbook. I'm not going to see that. I need you guys to complete them online. But nonetheless, you have this book. Feel free to use this if you feel more comfortable working out of a book. Whatever you have, that's a tool for you to use, but we don't need to fill anything out in this book. All that stuff will be done online. So then our third book is called the Electrical Wiring Residential. I'll refer to that as the EWR book all the time, sometimes the red book, obviously, for obvious reasons. But this is kind of a secondary textbook. It's actually made by a third party, but our main IEC student manual refers us to this book quite often. And here, coming up in a couple slides, I'll explain how the two interplay a little bit. And then the fourth piece, arguably one of the most important pieces, you're going to carry this with you for the next 3 years until the next code edition comes out, is your National Electrical Code 2020 version. So everything we talk about that has to do with electrical codes is coming from this book right here. So, we've got the textbooks out of the way. What comes next? The curriculum layout. How do we know what you guys should be reading and covering? So I'll tell you right away, this is a self-paced course. You guys are responsible for reading the content and then filling out the various worksheets and exercises, which, again, I'll show you more of in our next video. But how do you know what to read? What is, in this case, we're looking at lesson 116, for instance. What do I need to read as a part of lesson 116? So, and I pulled this lesson specifically because you can see here, they list it as homework. Being a self-paced course, you guys really don't have homework. It's just all work to be done. But this is where they tell you what to do for this chapter. And pay attention here because it can get a little confusing. They changed some things this year. But so what do you need to do for lesson 116? We need to thoroughly read lesson 116. So and this is the first page of your student manual for each chapter, by the way. So we need to read Student Manual 116, of course, for lesson 116. But then in this lesson, they have us reading EWR and then 19th edition. So our red book, they want us to read chapter 9 as well. Now here's where it gets, I think, a little confusing. So that's pretty self-explanatory. For lesson 116, we need to read lesson 116, and we need to read chapter 9 of the EWR. Okay, it makes pretty good sense. Right? But if we jump over to, for instance, lesson 130, this is kind of another example. They want us to read lesson 130, but now here they tell us to read lesson 131. We don't actually have to do that as a part of lesson 130. The way this course was set up, they want, for an in-person class, they want students to have read the chapter before they come into class that night. So they are telling them you should have already read 130, and then after this class now we need to read lesson 131. Also, because, and I know this, again, I'm very upset by the way they did this, but I know they tell us to read EWR chapter 27. That's a part of lesson 131 as well, because they list it after 131. So if I was to ask myself, what do I need to read for lesson 130? The answer is simply this. Anything listed, so for the chapter after the chapter I'm on, I don't have to read for this chapter. I read it for that chapter. So again, because this is 130, they list reading chapter 27 after 131. I know that I don't have to do those until lesson 130. And I'm going to explain that in a little greater detail in our next video. But using the LMS portal, our online version, I'm going to have this information sort of corrected and condensed that makes a lot more sense to you guys and takes a lot of the guesswork out. But I'm showing you this if you spend the time in the textbook trying to figure out what to read for this chapter. It's going to be fairly confusing. So I'll refer you to the online portal, the LMS, which we will see in our next video, right? So how's our course laid out? How's everything broken up? We work with a 2-semester system, a first semester and a second semester, fall semester, spring semester in this case, however you want to call it. So we have the beginning of the year starts the beginning of the first semester naturally. We're going to go about halfway and we're going to have a first semester midterm exam. And then we'll go to, for our regular typical students, it goes till just before Christmas, but we have then a first semester final exam, which marks the end of the first semester. We have a short break, and then we're back for the beginning of our second semester. Then we get about halfway through second semester, we have another midterm exam. And then finally, at the very end of the school year, we have what they call a core competency exam, or a type of final exam I'll explain a little more about in a moment. That marks the end of our second semester as well as the end of the school year. I know a lot of your schools work with, say, 4 marking periods. I'll work with your school administration to make sure they have the appropriate grades and everything spaced out. But essentially, it's a 2-semester system. And I want to talk a little bit next about how our grades interact with that 2-semester system. So, again, you're going to get a first semester grade and a second semester grade, right? So your first semester grade is made up 25% of your homework assignments, 25% of your quizzes, 25% is going to be your midterm exam score, and then 25% will be your final exam score. Exact same story for second semester, and then basically we roll the first semester and second semester into an average as your overall year grade. But the takeaway from this is your midterm exam and your final exam are very important. They're weighted quite high. Each one of those is one test, and each one is worth a quarter of your semester grade. So we got to take those pretty seriously. Speaking of midterms, finals, core competency exam, what exactly do we need to be aware of there? So we're going to have a midterm exam right at this point, as I said. That's going to cover everything from the beginning of the year up to that point. Okay, makes sense. Next up, we're then going to have a first semester final exam. That will cover everything after the midterm up to that point. And then we move on, we have a midterm for the second semester now. That's going to cover the beginning of the second semester to the middle of the second semester, naturally. Now here's where things change a little bit. For our end of the year final, our second semester final, we take what's called a core competency exam. So that IEC National puts out a test. It's intended to be a 4-hour test, and it covers the entire year from the first day to the last day. It's a tough test. We'll do a lot of work to try to get everybody prepared for that when the time comes. But just so you have an idea, that's how our finals and midterms and core competency all break down. So, fair warning, you can't forget things we talked about in the beginning of the year. You're going to need them on the core competency. And quite honestly, you're going to need them for years 2, 3, and 4 as you progress through our program. So, with all that said out of the way, I'm going to ask you guys to go ahead and jump back to the LMS, to the website, and then watch our third and final orientation video. You're going to get a lot from that one, so be sure to pay close attention. See you guys there.